Okay, it's recording. Go ahead.
So, good afternoon, everyone. We're here to present about actual planning. So, in architecture, actual actual plan refers to a plan in which the parts of the building or structure are arranged lengthwise along the given axis. In a central plan, the segments of the structure are arranged around the center in almost equal dimension. In actual planning, it is used as a method of city building that uses right angle as design discipline. This method requires sufficient space for building to be seen in the best advantage. So another characteristic for actual planning is that building in different heights occur in close groupings. Some form a rectangular architectural treatment such as arcading around the lower floors assist as visual continuity. So it shows variety and order in terms of the almost aesthetic of the each building neighboring buildings. So, however, there were multiplicity of ownership or where designers of individual building insist on pandering to their own egos. It may be the only way of organizing a city landscape which has any coherence. So in actual planning, the purpose of the street is mainly focused on enabling free movement of vehicles. The streets are also utilized to connect the buildings together. So a strong axis of organizing discipline for grouping has been used in many periods in the past and is not confined to particular cultural groupings arranged and it is arranged symmetrically about an axis.
To understand this further, let's go directly to the outstanding examples mentioned in the book. The first example is the Plan of Rome by Pope Sixtus V, which the main access points are the churches. Sixtus V was concerned to develop a structure of paths along which pilgrims could move freely from church to church. The greater processional routes established by Sixtus V set the pattern for the much later architectural development and
Hi,
innovation
China.
today. Yes,
Shania,
sir.
sorry. Can you go through all the slides? I have a feeling that you're in the wrong section. Can you show me the rest of the slides first? Next slide, though. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, okay, okay. You got there. I thought because what do you call this? I was worried you were in an actual planning of another sort of chapter of the book and not the streets one. Okay.
Okay, sir. So the next the second example that was mentioned was the Plan of Paris by George Eugene Haussmann. This plan was mainly concerned about the rapid movement of troops or the people in order to keep order in the city. In France in 1854 experienced war, and the UK declared war with Russia, and this was the main element of Haussmann's design consideration for Paris. An important objective of this plan was to facilitate the control of street fighting and insurrection among the population. The new boulevards between the main areas of the city were to provide easy movement of troops in times of riot, and other aims of the plan were to improve the city's appearance. And so, if we look at the map, each end of the arterial boulevards are connecting significant structures and are open space. Principal historic buildings, monuments, and squares. Another aim is to afford easy access to public buildings in times of celebration and to improve the state of health and the town through the systematic destruction of infected alleyways and centers of epidemic. Um, Bea, next slide. This is the plan of Paris. So,
Okay, good.
sorry, sir. So, next slide. With that, next slide, Bea. With that being said, we will not be focusing on those outstanding examples that was mentioned by Moten, rather on specific elements that makes up a good street. So next slide. partly as a response to partly as adto sa before that Bea. Yes, that one. Partly as a response to traffic increase, the main function of the street has been compromised, enabling the free movement of vehicles. This resulted in the neglect of the street as a place with three-dimensional properties. So, emerging from this situation, bridges became one of the significant elements in axially designed streets. Here are some surviving examples of the bridges that carry a street rather than a road across an opening. So the first one is the Ponte Vecchio Bridge in Florence. So this crosses the Arno in Florence at its narrowest point. This connects the Uffizi to the Palazzo Pitti on the other side of the Arno. There are visible shops on the bridge since the 13th century, and initially they were butchers and fishmongers, then later turned to tanners whose industrial waste caused a stench in the area. So in 1593, Ferdinand I decreed that only goldsmiths and jewelers are allowed to have shops on the bridge in order to improve their well being while walking on the bridge. So the second one is the Rialto Bridge in Venice. This is the oldest among the four bridges that crosses the Grand Canal. The present Ponte di Rialto was built in stone between 1588 and 1591 by Antonio de Ponte to substitute the wooden bridge which has collapsed two times and had been partially burnt down in 1310. So the design of the stone bridge is still similar to the predecessors with two inclined ramps that are connected by an arch in the middle. This bridge connects the Piazza San Marco to the Rialto Market. So we can see that in both examples of bridges, um, the sense of the sense of enclosure is still present and there is interaction between spaces rather than just a bridge that we are so used now that is used by vehicles only. So that the three-dimensional property of the streets in these examples are still preserved. So I will now be calling Fiona.
So I will be discussing the next few examples. The next one is the Pultney Bridge and Great Pultney Street in Bath, England. So Robert Adam built the Pultney Bridge and he used the Ponte Vecchio as an inspiration. The owner of the bridge is Sir William Pultney. He was the one who commissioned Adam to design the bridge that was built between 1769 and 1774. The Adam Bridge is used as a river crossing, a visual junction that connects the two parts of the 18th century Bath and fine entrance to the great streets of Europe. It also sets as a unique example of urban street architecture. Following this, the Great Pulteney Street is a continuation of Argyle Street that leads to the Sydney Gardens. The Great Pulteney Street stretches at 300 meters long by 30 meters wide. Next slide, please. So Robert Adam also prepared plans for the development of a new town in Bathwick, and his first and most imaginative scheme for the estate linked the bridge by a wide road to a great circus from which five other streets led off. These in turn were crossed by streets converging on a semicircular open space at the bridge entrance. But his schemes were not adopted, and the final plans were drawn by another designer. Next slide, please. Next is the Regis Street, London. So John Nash, together with a firm of developers, Leverton and Chauner, was instructed to make plans for the Marylebone Park and also for a new street to facilitate communication between North and South London in that part of the city. He proposed that this clear edge in development should form the root of the new street to provide a boundary and complete separation between the streets and squares occupied by the nobility and gentry, and the narrow streets and meaner homes occupied by mechanics and the trading part of the community. Nash explained later that his purpose was that the new street should cross the eastern entrance to all of the street occupied by the higher classes and to leave out to the east all the bad streets, and as a sailor would express himself, to hog all the avenues that went to good streets. This may not sit comfortably with the more social ideas of early 20th century planning, but it proved a perfectly good strategy for realizing improved land values from a property speculation. So, Portland Place by the Adam Brothers and the finest street in London at the time was the northernmost starting point for the new street. The street, Nash continued southwards, crossing Oxford Street through a circus. The length of the new street was cleverly articulated at important junctions or where a change of direction became necessary. At this critical position, a circus or a square was introduced so that no length of street was uninterrupted for more than 600 meters. Next slide, please. So Nash was asked to reconsider the new street in greater detail. The one that was finally adopted for the development introduced instead of the square a portion of curving street resembling in that respect the High Street at Oxford. The development from Regis Park to St. James Park then along the mall to Buckingham Palace is one of the masterpieces of European urban design. The semicircular sweep of the ionic colonnaded crescent directs the movement to Place and heralds a magnificent opening to the street sequence. At the crossing with Oxford Street, Nash utilized the circus shown in the earlier plan. The circus not only dignified an important junction but also facilitated another directional change. Remarking on the sinuosity of Regent Street comments on the superb handling of the changes in direction of the street by cylinders and flat domes of the bordering buildings. The major change in direction was achieved using the quadrant, which took Oxford's High Street as the model. So, next slide, please. So the major change in direction was achieved using the quadrant, which took Oxford's High Street as the model. Regent Street, unlike its model in Oxford, was a formal composition with covered colonnaded walkways down its whole length, and its uniform architectural treatment was in complete contrast to the picturesque and largely medieval street scenes in Oxford. Since its completion by Nash, the street has undergone many changes. The changes brought on the street were architectural in nature, involving a change in scale to suit the new shopping needs. Nash's Sacco buildings, or those built with his approval, were replaced by larger and, on the whole, more ponderous buildings. Despite these changes and the despoiling of Piccadilly Circus, the route from Regent's Park to Buckingham Palace retains in the main its original line on an urban form. It illustrates that good urban design is not solely dependent upon the quality of the surrounding architecture, though if an opportunity ever arises for the rebuilding of part of the street, it would be well to reconsider a return to its original scale and character. That would be all. Thank you.
Okay, good. A bit too much reading, bro. We'll fix that later. So, one key thing to note here for axial planning for streets is that it connects two separate districts, two separate places, and then you sort of maintain the building height, architectural style, so it becomes unified, like from the two different points. So, we'll go into that a bit later. I really have to go. I'll meet you on Friday. I'll stop recording here. So overall, good